Who's the other guy?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to SharePoint Power Hour. I'm Laura Rogers, and SharePoint Power Hour is our show that we do live every week, every Wednesday at 11 Central. And this is me and my team at Rackspace Hosting. We're a team of SharePoint consultants within Rackspace. And we do this every week. What is SharePoint Power Hour about? It is things that you can do in SharePoint and Office 365 without having to be a programmer and without having to be a hardcore server admin. It's all that stuff in between. We've been doing this for probably almost 2 years now. We've got 80-something episodes. It's SharePoint RAX is the name of our YouTube channel, and they're all in there in a playlist. And all you have to do every week to watch the show is just show up on that YouTube channel, and you can watch it live. We use a Google Hangout that streams live to YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, so the whole point of doing this live is to be able to get interactivity from you. So if you're watching it on YouTube, you can actually click the little link to take you over to the Google app, the Google Hangout, and the Google Hangout will have little squares at the top right that lets you switch between apps, and one of the apps is called the Q&A, and that's where you can have a little panel. You can click that, and you can have a little panel down the right side of the screen. Also, we use a Google Hangout that streams live. Don't mute yourselves. And I don't know why my screen keeps turning blue. I don't know if y'all see mine turning blue or not, but anyway, that's where you can ask us questions. So that's why we do it live, is because we like to have that interactivity with you as we're doing our sessions. So today, I'm going to be doing the demo on how to show SharePoint, a list of SharePoint documents in a document library on some other site in SharePoint, and several different ways to do it. And before I get started, though, we'll go through everyone and get everyone to introduce themselves, everyone in the room. And we'll start with, let's see, I see on my screen Jason, then Joelle, then Kevin, then Tanya. So y'all just go in that order, I guess. Okay, we'll skip Jason. He disappeared. Okay, Joelle, you go first.
Hello, I am Joelle Farley. I am a consultant on the Business Solutions team. I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I have worked with SharePoint for about 7 or 8 years now. And I what my main focus is as far as SharePoint is concerned is information architecture, taxonomy, and then a lot of the out-of-the-box features. And that's about it.
Okay, we'll go back to you, Jason, since you disappeared there for a second.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to be heard.
A little bit, just a little muffled. Just talk nice and loud.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Himmelstein. I am the new member of the Rackspace team. I am here. I'm a SharePoint MVP, and I'm the Office 365 Advisory Services Manager for Rackspace. I focus on all things SharePoint and cloudy. Specifically interested in all sorts of fun BI and infrastructure type of topics. That's it. So thanks for having me today.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hughes, SharePoint architect here at Rackspace, and based out of Kansas City office. And my role as architect is to work with our clients and try to make sure that whatever their needs for SharePoint are something we can do, and then work with the rest of our team to resolve their issues or provide their solution.
And I'm Tanya Kaiser. I'm also a new member of the team as well, and I am the admin for our internal SharePoint environment here at Rackspace. So I deal with a lot of the same stuff that Laura talks about. My customers just happen to be my fellow Rackers. And I'm based here in Castle in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, all right, that's everybody. I started adding a couple. There's a little app that you'll see if you're in the Google Hangout on the right called the Showcase app, and I've started adding a couple of links in there so that you can. It's basically just a couple of blog posts that I've written on sort of related to the topic that I'm talking about today. So I'm posting those in there real quick so you can, as a viewer, you'll be able to switch between the little Showcase app, which looks like a little yellow tag, and the little Q&A app, which is a little sort of turquoise Q&A button. Okay, so I went ahead and posted those in there, and I'll flip back to the Q&A. Don't be shy, say hello. Want to see everybody who's here. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. And let's see. Share the correct screen. All right, and then I put together 2 whole slides. I was trying to be cool like Tavis. He's not here today, but he always has a plethora of slides, and he's very organized when he does these, and I usually don't. I usually just jump into some demo, but I just did this 5 minutes ago, so I'm going to put some slides together. So the concept today is showing documents in another site, and this applies to SharePoint and Office 365. And the 3 different methods I'm going to focus on today are creating a data view web part with SharePoint Designer, exporting it and importing it onto another site. Yes, you can still do that in 2013. And I'm going to show you how to use the content search web part, and then how to even customize it just a little bit. That's a little devy, but I'm not a programmer, so I'll show you kind of how I figured it out with my non-programming skills. So, and you guys who are in the room, Jason, all you guys, feel free to throw in any comments or questions as I go, because I'd love to get your feedback. All right, so first of all, hopefully you can see this. I have the library here on my screen. This is in my on-premises SharePoint 2013. But this concept I'm about to show is you can do it in on-premises or Office 365. So I have a document library, and this is actually on a sub-site. So I'm on a sub-site of my portal called Services, and this project files library is a library in that sub-site. So I just want to show these project files just somewhere else in SharePoint, and in the same site collection, maybe on the home page or on one of the sister sites here. I'll show you a little trick that we can do to do that. Now, I'm going to open up this site in SharePoint Designer. So I opened up the services site, and just hit refresh just for fun. And I can go to my list and library. So I want to show you what it looks like when I try to go and do this, okay? Because I want to show you the difference and sort of the little trick behind it. So if I go and open a view, so I just have my regular default all items view of my library, and I kind of click around in here, I don't have anything remotely resembling things that I'm used to being able to do with a data view web part in previous versions of SharePoint. But the trick here, and I'm just going to go back to my library, actually this is project files, so same difference, services files, project files. The trick here, though, is to create a view and not use the default view style. I'm going to call it old school. So when I go to all I have to do to make that one little difference is go to Style and pick anything except for default, because the default one is going to have all this newfangled Office SharePoint 2013 sort of styling to it. I'm just going to pick one of the other ones. I'll pick Basic Table and click OK. And you'll notice that sort of in production, in a regular library, when you do this, this really confuses the end users, because then they lose their little thing at the top of the library, and they lose their ability to quickly flip between views. They have to go up here to do it. And we had a whole power hour that we did about web part settings and about kind of some of this newer stuff in 2013 up here. We had a whole power about web part settings. But when I flip over to old school, you'll notice that it just looks like an old web part from before SharePoint 2013 with a nice little drop-down box that we were used to. So this is my project files library, and I'm going to go over to SharePoint Designer again and go ahead and refresh this so it will know that I created a new view. And I'll go to project files, and I'll see. So let me do this one more time and open just the regular all documents view and show you that there's nothing special that I can do with it really, except a bunch of stuff with code. But then when I go to my project files and go to my old school view in SharePoint Designer, and I put my cursor in here, look at this. Remember these things? Awesome. See, look, that's some of the stuff that we're used to having when we're used to doing good old data view web parts in previous versions of SharePoint. So that gives us things that we can modify a little bit. One of the things that I see a lot of people asking about just in the forums and things like that ever since 2013 came out is, I just want to go create a parameter. I just want to have a parameter for my web part. How do I do that now that we have, you know, we can't get to the parameters and stuff now in SharePoint 2013? Well, you just have to create one of those old school views, not using the default style, and then there you have your parameters that you can create. So little stuff like that, some of that stuff is still in there. You don't see some things also, though, like conditional formatting is not there at all. So it's not the full functionality that you might have had, but some of it's in there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just go to my, kind of flip between here, you can see some of this stuff. I'll go to my web part tab, and I'm going to click, see this is save web part, I'm going to save it to file. And it's going to save a .webpart file for me. So I'll just put this on my desktop. I'll just, actually this is when I was practicing it earlier, so I called it services docs, and I'm just going to save it over that one. And do you want this web part to always show list data from the current website? If you select no, the web part will show data from the list at the path project files relative to the site in which it is used. So this is a kind of situation where I'm going to go ahead and click yes, but if you had a web part that was, maybe if you had a bunch of different sites that had a library that had you were using like the same pattern, like you had a library that was under the same path in a bunch of different places, you could use a relative one if you clicked no, and that would be relative to where you are as opposed to being absolutely that exact library. So I'll go ahead and click yes, and now I've exported my web part, and I don't have to do anything else with this web part in SharePoint Designer. So now I can just go to some other site in my environment here. I'll just go to site contents here, and I'll go create a new web part page maybe. Let's see. Test web part. I don't have any files in here called test web part page. Okay, test web part page. It doesn't already exist. All right, so now I can take that .webpart file that I exported, and I can do, see over here, this is kind of hidden, not many people notice it over here, but it says upload web part. So I can click upload web part, and I can go browse, and that's where I can go to that. Let's see, I got a lot of silly little, there's no Rackspace slide picture there. Where's my .web? There it is. All right, so I'll go upload that. Now the confusing thing right here is when you click upload, then it disappears. Then you just have to click add a web part again, and then there's your web part, and it's under imported web parts. So there are my files. Now watch this. Now it looks just like, see that old school sort of look and feel where it doesn't have the newer little boxes across the top and it's got the little drop downs, but watch this. As soon as I click stop editing, look at that. It's got the new look and feel now, and it's got the new little ellipsis, and it's got the new little stuff at the top of it, and it all looks normal like a 2013 web part. And I can even go just open these files. So I'm on a completely different site in the same site collection, and I can go and open those same files, and now it's just as if I was in that same spot. Of course, there's my file I just opened. All right, Tanya, do you see people asking internally for stuff like that a lot? Is that something that you were asking me about the other day?
Yeah, especially I've mentioned this, before on one of our power hours. We're undergoing some internal migrations, moving from, SharePoint 2007 and 2010 and trying to get everybody onto 2013. And people are, getting used to the new SharePoint Designer, the new features of 2013, and they're looking for this sort of solution. We need to keep subsites segregated to teams, but other teams still need to have access to those, and we want them on the root site. So this is very much in line with what people are looking for.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to get myself a little golf clap there. So let's see, do we have any questions in the Q&A so far? Okay, so that was the first method. That was just basically go into SharePoint Designer. The trick is it has to be like an old school, non-default style web part to be able to go take that and then just go put it on another site. I've seen people have issues when they're doing this if you have like an extremely highly customized list, maybe with a lot of just weird columns and different columns, and SharePoint gets confused sometimes. But usually when it's just nice and simple and out of the box, and it's not, you haven't done too much crazy stuff to that list or library, it typically works like that. I have a blog post that I wrote back in SharePoint 2010 on how to do this, and it's got a bajillion people saying that they liked it and a bajillion people saying that they can't get it to work and it doesn't work for them. So it's kind of hit or miss, but in 2013 it seems to work fine when you just do that old school style. All right, but again, that's only in the same within the same site collection, because it uses this unique ID when it's in there that's sort of embedded in the inside of that web part, and the unique ID is unique only within that site collection. So the next method I'm going to show is going to be how to do it with a content search web part. So I saw somebody recently ask, okay, how do you do this? How do you show documents on another site, from one library on another site collection? And someone's answered, well, just use the content search web part. Well, how exactly do you use the content search web part, right? I'm going to go ahead and show you the exact steps so you'll be able to do that and be able to get that up and running. Okay, so I'm going to go to that same library. So I'll go over to my services and I'll go to my project files here. And I want the same library, and I want to take that and I want to show it in another site or even in another site collection. Can do that. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to take the URL to this and I'm going to paste it in Notepad here. Okay, you'll notice there's a lot of weird, funky ugliness. Well, I just went to this library and pasted this URL. This layouts 15 start ASPX, you don't need any of that. You don't need the /forms all items stuff. One little trick, if you don't like all that weirdness in your URLs and it drives you nuts, and there are definitely going to be pros and cons to this, and that some of you in the room might know more than I do, but this minimal download strategy thing, if I deactivate that, then that will get rid of all that stuff. Jason and Kevin are probably like shaking their heads like, really, you shouldn't do that. You need your minimal download strategy. What are the implications, guys? Does anybody know to me deactivating that?
The big implication is that the page load performance may slow down on for pages that are very complex or have a whole lot of web parts, or web parts that are showing a whole lot of data, a lot of graphics, that kind of thing. What the minimal download strategy does is actually use the cached pages on the server to render, and then only render the differences out of the database and the data itself. Instead of when you turn that off, it's got to actually assemble that page from scratch every time it's loaded, or at least the first time, depending on your browser settings. So it can slow things down for very complex pages, but for most out-of-the-box pages, it's not going to be a huge issue on most farms.
But get a nice, pretty URL, see, without all that stuff in it, right? Okay, so that was just one little trick I wanted to show you. If you don't have a lot of big complex pages and you don't have to worry about your site slowing down. Let's see. So I have a question. Hello from Germany. Is there a Power Hour describing how to create those drop-down menus on top of your website? Those are out of the box. Those are, yeah, I didn't do anything to create those. So just in the navigation settings. You just have to have publishing features enabled to be able to have those. But we did didn't we do a whole power hour about navigation, guys? I think Ryan did that one. I'm not sure. Maybe one of y'all can check while I'm talking. Okay, so I've got my link here to my library. So that's what I need to be able to go show this library somewhere else. So I'm going to go over to, I can just actually go to a whole other site collection. Let's see. rtm.contoso.com/sites/team. Maybe like that. So this is a completely different site collection, and I can go and show this library over here too. So I'll go just add a page just for fun. And the only thing you have to make sure of when you do this is that this is all going to be based on search. So the people that are looking at this web part, even when they're in the other site collection, they still have to have permissions to be able to get to that content, because this is all based on, you know, it's security trimmed. So if they don't have permissions to the stuff in that document library, they're not going to be able to see the content in the web part. Carlos says minimum download strategy doesn't always work well with pages that leverage custom JavaScript added to the page. Good to know. Thanks, Carlos. All right, so I stuck a content search web part on a page. By default, it looks kind of ugly. So what I'm going to do is go edit. I know we've done several other power hours about the content search web part as well, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I'll just say I want to show 15 documents, and I change my query, and then this is where I need to have that URL of the document library that I wanted to show here. So I'll pick documents here since there are documents in my document library, and I'll say specify URL, and then as soon as I hit tab, let's see, it doesn't show anything. Let me see. Document, specify URL. Let me try clicking. Recently changed. Oh, you know what? I just put those in the library and I didn't index it. Okay, I'm just going to go to a different library. Because it's based on search, right? So you have to have search index has to have actually run before they're going to show in a content search web part, right? So I'm just going to put a library of another, a URL of another library in here, and there we go. So that's all it was. And I'm not going to try and run my search index while I'm doing a demo with my VM running and with Google running and everything else running at the same time. So that's why it was. And then if you have search running nice and frequently, of course I don't on my VM, then you'll have your up-to-date information. But that is one of, you have pros and cons. You have pros and cons with all these different methods, and that's one of the pros to the other method I showed you with the data view web part, is that is the exact data and it's always live. And one of the cons to having search results showing is that your search index has to have had run, so it's not going to be up to the exact second necessarily all the time. Ann says you can also do that with a managed navigation. Would make a great SharePoint Power Hour. Yes, one of y'all, I would love you to do a SharePoint Power Hour on managed navigation. All right, so that would be fun. Yeah, that's always fascinated me. So I say specify URL, and then I put the URL to that library, and then of course I can even do refiners to narrow it down even further. And then it's got list with paging, slideshow. List with paging is going to let people scroll from item to item, and then it's going to have 2 lines like that. So you can see that it's showing me folders here. So maybe I don't want to show folders, so that's something that I could do in my refiners because it's sticking the folder names in there. So I'll go back and edit my web part and change my query. So how would I do my refiners so that it shows items in a document library that are not folders? Everything except folders. Does anybody in here have an idea? Here we go. Look at that. It's got a content type document. There. So when I add that, and I'll go ahead and hit apply, then, all right, so then it's nice and clean and you're just ignoring all the folders. And then I can do property mapping. So it says 2 lines, but it's only showing me 1 line. So one thing I can do is I can say I want to change the mapping. So I'll go ahead and I click change the mapping, and then I click OK, and then for some reason the next time I go back in it, it's got my options for mapping. It's just one of those weird things. All right, so here, this is where, okay, so link URL is when I click on one of these items, where's it going to take me? It's going to take me to the path of that item. And then line 1 is going to be the title, and maybe I want line 2 to be like who the author was or what the last modified date was or something like that. I can do, let's see, it's got last activity, it's got last modified time. So it's got different things that I can put for line 2. I'll go ahead and click OK. So now the problem again with the content search web part is that there's not much to it. Like, there are those few little options that you have in there for the way that it can look, but it's not much. It doesn't give you a lot of times people want it to look more like a document library, right? Do you guys see people asking that? Just say, well, can it just look like a library? Can I just see it, you know, with all the columns and having it look like a table of information instead of just this big ugly list? Well, that's when you get display templates. That's when the display templates come into play. So we're about halfway through Power Hour, and the next half I'm going to show you me, a non-programmer, fumbling through display templates and how I was able to create one. I actually did create one. So yay. All right, so I created one called, look at this. Is that amazing or what? This right here on top is a display template that I created. And I see if I can do it, anybody can. Now, one of the frustrating things that I found out as I was creating this, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I researched this for hours, but this top part, like the headings of the table, this is called what goes in what's called the control. And the control is sort of like the container that all this is in. And again, these are non-development terminology, so y'all correct me as to what the real terminology might be. But the control cannot have dynamic, like, column names in it. Like, I can't say, okay, so whatever fields I pick to show here, make the control have those words in it. Because the body of the information here, the list information, Anne says applause. Thanks, Anne. The list information down here is dynamic, and I can pick that from in my web part settings, just like I showed you with the other one. But I can't. It's not going to automatically show those words up here. So that was one sort of stumbling block that I came across, where I actually had to hard code what I wanted these headings to be, just inside of this HTML file. So you can see down here that I said I put property mappings here, and I just said line 1, line 2, line 3. I should have called them column 1, 2, and 3, but for some reason I called them line 1, 2, and 3. But you can see that's file, date, and author, line 1, 2, and 3. So I'll show you how I did this. All right, so here is, I don't want that one. I want the root of my site collection here, and I went to all files here, and I used this little pin. So this is the root of my whole site collection, and I'm going to see if I can scroll. Oh, that sucks that it won't let me. There, oh, there, I can collapse that. Okay, so I dug into this little catalogs thing right here, and into master page. No, wait, yeah, and display templates. And then content web parts, and then that's where I'm going to see, you can see I've got a bunch of other junk in here that I kind of got from other places or imported or was playing around with it. So yours is definitely not going to have this much stuff in it. But this is just, I found people have put these out on the web in different places. If you look for CSR, which stands for client side rendering, or display templates. That's where you might see people have put things like this out on GitHub and places like that. If any of you in this room, my coworkers, have any links, or have you seen anything like that, if you could share them in the little showcase, that would be awesome. But that's kind of where I have a whole bunch in here. Now, out of the box, now you don't want to be editing the JS files in here. So the JS files, the JavaScript file, is automatically going to get generated when you edit or create an HTML file. So this regular old list one that's just out of the box, I'll go ahead and just open that up. So I opened that, and let me get some good real estate here. I opened that and I looked at it, and then this is what I used to sort of customize and figure out how I can make it look more like a table, and make it look, and have headings in it. So I'll show you. So the control is going to be just, remember that wrapper around it. So I'll go ahead and go back up to my content web parts over here. Oh goodness, I'm trying to. I put my resolution as this really weird resolution so that I could show you, so you could be able to see the detail better. But it's just harder to get around in here. So I'll go edit the file. All right, and I just basically played around with this for hours and just tested it until I got it looking the way I wanted it to look. But I took that original HTML page and this one, control list, and just gave it my own name, made a copy of it. I didn't want to mess with the original one. And look at this. See, I don't know how to do divs, and I don't know how to do JavaScript, but I do know how to do tables in HTML. So I just did a table and a table header and a table row and some table cells. And see, I just typed the words in here, file, date, and author. And see, when I look over here, file, date, and author, file, date, and author, that's where that's coming from. So that's all I did really in the control, was put this little table head in here, and then this little thing in here, that was already there. That's just what I got from, see, this little previous one, this little stuff here. Any developer, any of you guys who know more about code, have any insight into explaining any of what I've shown so far in better terms? Jason's just probably smiling, shaking his head, like, okay, whatever.
I'm having some issues trying to get all my equipment working over here, so.
Oh, okay, all right.
Are we all right?
Okay, so that's just the control. That's just the part that had the headers in it. So I've got, let's go into my content web parts over here. And then I have the one that I call Laura 3 lines. So there was item 2 lines, and that's the one that was out of the box. That's the one that you saw just now when I demoed it before. All right, so item 2 lines is going to look like blah, blah, blah. I don't know what all that stuff is. And then I've got, okay, so I've got 2 lines of something. It's showing me something with a icon, so that tells me that's going to be like that icon that shows next to each file name. And then I've got this line 1 dot default value, see, and then I've got this line 2 dot default value. So I was like, oh, well, if it's got a line 1 and a line 2, see, I can make mine have 3 lines, and maybe I can make them go across the page like columns instead of just one underneath the other one. So I just kind of looked at what their syntax is in here, not knowing necessarily what all this stuff means, and I'll show you. And I created item 3 lines, Laura. And Joelle, I know you've done some of this too, so maybe I'll see if I can get you to share some of your insights into that as well. So I used line 1, line 2, line 3. And then just like I said, I did a table. So just like I showed you that I did a table on the control, see, I've got like a table row, and I've got table cells. The table header is already in the control, so I didn't put a table header down here in the body, but put a table row, and then I just took all that syntax that I had found in this other 2 lines one, and I basically just pasted it inside of this little table cell. And then I created 2 more table cells here, like that. So, and it's got this little line 1 thing, line 2, and line 3, and then that's what ends up showing as line 1, line 2, and line 3. But the problem, I should probably like just take all these files and post them on my blog, so y'all can play around with them. The problem with this, though, is that if I want this to show maybe something other than a file name, and this to show something other than a date, etc., I actually have to go into the control itself, that HTML file, and change the words in it. So I'd have to go into control list Laura and see where it says file, date, and author. I just have to manually change what those say. Joelle, does this seem like it's kind of along the lines of some of the stuff you've done when you tweaked these before?
Yeah, but the file, date, and author, it's not just changing it there. Are you talking about pointing to different fields?
No, this isn't. Well,
or are you just changing the name?
Just the headings. That's the only way I could find to do it, to put it in the headings. Everything else, everything else I found was going to put it like in every single row, and I didn't want it to do that.
Yeah.
So, but I think you had done one like for a client or something where you had, not in the control, but in the item one, you had a whole bunch of different fields that were down the page, right?
It's tricky trying to pull in different fields, so different crawled properties. It can be a little tricky to get those pulled in. Actually, managed properties, because you have crawled properties and you want to map them to managed properties, and it can be tricky to get those pulled in. But you have to you have to do something at the top. You have to put in some information at the top of the file, and then you have to call it down below so that it will show up.
Okay, yeah, because I did mine really easy. I just did it with just fields that are already going to be there, like the date, the author, and stuff like that. But so you're talking about having like where would those have been? Like link URL and stuff like that? Do you remember?
No, it would be at the top. And then under where, I think it's manage property mapping. It's like the line 8.
Oh, okay.
And then that's where if you had like custom site columns or manage metadata fields or something that you wanted to pull in, you'd have to work in there. And then you could call it down below once it's there.
Oh, okay. So, so what she's talking about is, now does it help, Joelle, if those are created as site columns ahead of time instead of just columns that are just buried in some list or library?
Well, it would have to be, yeah. In order for it to be crawled, like without you having to do anything extra, it's best to have a site column.
Okay, so you guys keep this in mind when you're doing just sort of these quick little business solutions in SharePoint, these little no-code business solutions in SharePoint. That just like remember from my onboarding demo that I did a while back. Before I even got started creating with my lists and libraries and things, I actually went into site settings and created everything I was going to need as a site column. And then I created everything that I was going to need as a, the contact list that I was using that was sort of a more customized contact list. I created that as a content type. So site columns especially are going to be what you're going to need to be able to have those available in your content search web parts and when you're going to want to roll things up like that. So for example, if I go up to Contoso Home, and I am going to, so I'm kind of moving away from that little custom one that I built, but I'm going to show you more of what Joelle's talking about. Because if you're trying to add a content search web part to a page and you're wondering why certain columns that exist aren't showing to be able to show in the content search web part, this is kind of what I'm referring to. All right, so if I go to property mappings, and I'm going to say change my property mappings, and then look at this. I've got these drop-down boxes. So this drop-down box has got a ton of stuff in it. and it's going to have a lot of things that are out of the box that are available in here. But things are not going to show in here, things that you've created that are more custom to your own business. They're not going to show in here unless you've created them as a site column. And there's also another step that you have to take to make it a managed property, though, right? Just adding it as a site column, sometimes they end up showing here like admit date. I know that that's from a special list that I have. But if they don't show, if site columns don't show here, you actually have to go into your search administration, right? Is that right, Kevin? You were talking about this the other day.
Or your schema.
Yeah.
And you can
do that in the site collection or in central admin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's where you'd have to actually take that site column and make sure that it's assigned to a managed property or a called property.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go to my schema right here. All right, so the things that I've showed you so far for displaying content from one site to another was fairly simple because it was using just out-of-the-box stuff like the file name and the author and date and stuff like that. So what I'm getting into right now, just in these last few minutes, is just some of the things that are important to know if you are trying to show columns in your search web parts or sort and filter by columns in your search web part and you don't see them there. So in your site collection administration, I just went to my schema, and here's where I can see here's a long list. It looks exactly like that list that I was seeing just now when I was trying to map fields in my web part. So this is where I would have to go create a new one. So if I created a column that was just buried in a list and it was too late to go create it as a site column and I just needed to use the one that was already just directly created on a list, I can still use that though, right guys? I just have to map that exact name to it with an official managed property in here, right?
If it's a site column, it should be added to the search index and or at the time of the next crawl.
Yeah.
To the crawled properties and assigned a managed property, but you'd have to wait for the next search crawl for that automatic mapping to happen.
Okay. So
if it's not a site column, then you have to do everything manually.
Yes. Okay. So one of the things that I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. One of the things that someone was asking that we can still do in a whole separate power hour, they were asking a couple of power hours ago was, what if I have a very large list and I want to be able to do something other than have to create, if I've got like 10 or 20,000 items in this list. I want to do something other than have to create all these different filter views. I want people to just be able to go to that list and be able to quickly get to what they want to get to. And we kind of touched on the concept of being able to use search for that and have like a custom search interface for that. So, but you have to know ahead of time. So for this very large list of your thousands and thousands of items, did you have the forethought to create everything as a site column ahead of time? Probably not. I'd say 90% of the time not. Is that, you guys agree that they usually have not done that? So when Kevin's talking about doing it manually, he's talking about having to actually go in here and manually create managed properties and crawl properties and map them to whatever those property names are that are buried inside of that list or library. And so I know that Benjamin Nolan, N-A-U-L-I-N, N-I-A-U-L-I-N, has written a great blog post about managed properties versus crawled properties and kind of how to know all that. But the good thing about it is if you create them as site columns ahead of time, there's so much stuff like that that you don't have to worry about because they will just be there, right? All right, so
yeah, the only caveat with that is sometimes the automatic mapping will give them odd names, like OWS_description, and so you might have a list of properties that you pulled up, the description, OWS subscription, and 3 other, say, description, any of which may be the exact one you're looking for, but not sometimes, because it's actually mapping to a different library or a different site column or a different scoped property.
I think in that situation usually is when I would just test, right? Just try each one and see what happens. All right, so you guys out there, do you have any scenarios having to do with showing content from one list or library on a different site or site collection, and any other scenarios that we didn't cover that you're curious about? Let's see, I pointed to a couple of other blog posts that I wrote about this. I wrote one called, under my little documents category here. Let me share my screen again. There we go. Go to my blog post and click Documents over here. Then this one called Ways to Display Multiple Libraries. I wrote that a long time ago. That was back in SharePoint 2007. But then this more recent one, the cross-site concepts, this has to do with a lot of the same stuff that we were talking about today. And so this cross-site publishing concept that came out in 2013 is actually, it utilizes the same concept of search results that we're talking about. So a lot of the same things that you, concerns and things that you'll need to take into consideration having to do with just showing things in a content search web part are also things that you'll need to know for cross-site publishing. Cross-site publishing has just got kind of a built-in, more formal way of doing it. You're writing things in one place and they're showing up in another place, but again, it's all based around search, and whatever permissions you've given someone to something, those are the things they're going to see. And then let's see, yeah. We actually did a whole power hour on send to locations, just the concept of sending something somewhere else. So this blog post is more of moving or showing something in another place in SharePoint, and this concept that I've been talking about in this power hour is more just displaying something from one place to another. Tanya, internally at Rackspace, do you think that the scenarios that you see that people are asking about, just quickly needing to display something one place to another, do you think that one of those would be a quick way to help them out?
Yeah, I do. And we do have a few situations where we occasionally want to display something, from a completely separate site collection to another. Usually that's when we have, very large site collections and they've been split up by design. So even that, across site collections would be useful.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So yeah, definitely the content search web part's gonna be the way that you're gonna want to do it. Across site collections, cross web apps, and then the little data view web part way is going to be the way that you can quickly just take the actual library itself and put it on another, show it on another site like that. Alrighty. Well, I'm actually on vacation today, so I think it's okay if I cut it 10 minutes short, huh? So, anyway, does anybody else in the little Q&A have any other questions about that? All right. Fun with the data view web part. It wasn't that much data view web part, but it was a little bit. There's not much you can do with it anymore. I think that it's exciting that you can still do parameters with it, because some people still just, that's all they want to be able to do, just throw a parameter in. And that's how you can do it. Just remember, it's the old school no default view that lets you do that. Alrighty. Does anybody have any, see, Jason, you might be doing next week, right?
Possibility, yeah. I just think I finally got my whole rig working here. Can you guys hear me finally?
Yes.
Amazing what happens when you switch to the Mac instead of the PC.
Awesome. Okay. We'll be posting whatever that topic is on our little site, on our Google Hangout, on our YouTube, and you guys be looking out for that. And I will actually be teaching my week-long online SharePoint Power User class all week next week, so I will not be here. But Hope everybody has a good week between now and then. Bye.
Hi, everyone.